as a little kid, I played at the car wash at night when my parents were working. I started working here part-time when I was about 12. I was washing towels at the full service, and 50 cents an hour my dad paid me. And I joked that some days that was probably more than I was worth, but that was where I started out at. And then I went to college and worked part-time through college, and my degree's not in a related field at all. I don't have a business or management degree. I didn't expect to come back to car washing at that time. But when I graduated, I looked around and talked to my dad and said, I'd like to come back and work for a year if there's room for me in the company, and decide where to go from there. And that would have been about 19 years ago now, and I've been here ever since.
Welcome back to the Modern Car Wash Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Zalaznik, and on today's episode, we sit down with Dave Melhorn from Kleen Car Wash, located in central Pennsylvania. Now, we try to figure out if Dave is a second or third generation car wash owner, but regardless, Dave knows his car washes inside and out. Him and his family recently converted a full-serve car wash to an express exterior, and Dave also gives us insight into a large self-service and in-bay strategy to address the more rural needs of the central Pennsylvania community. Dave is a great guest to connect with, so let's get into it. Dave Melhorn, welcome to the Modern Car Wash Podcast.
Thanks, Kevin. Good to be here.
You are our second guest that we've had on that is not within the Hoffman development, walls or building.
Okay.
And for our audience out there, life's not easy sometimes. We did have some technical difficulties, but we got it all figured out. So without further ado, Dave, let's just jump right in. And can you just tell us about yourself, the car wash company, Kleen Car Wash, where you're located, just a general kind of get to know you, elevator pitch type thing for our audience.
Yeah, so Kleen Car Wash, we're located in central Pennsylvania, very close to the middle of the state. We have one conveyor car wash and 3 self-serves with in-bay automatics. One of those self-serve in-bay locations is actually on the same site as the tunnel. We're a family business. We've been washing cars since 1978. The tunnel was the first car wash, and we added the self-serves over the last 40 years.
Gotcha. So when the family opened the car wash in 78, was it your father, your grandfather?
It was actually my grandfather. My grandparents purchased the wash. It was an existing wash already, and hired my parents to run it from day one. So it was my grandparents were absentee owners almost immediately, but they were the original owners, and my parents were the operators until '94 when they purchased it.
Gotcha. We had Justin Alfred from Benny's Car Wash on the last episode, and is a third generation owner. And I had talked to him about, the first generation builds it, the first generation starts it, second generation builds it, third generation kind of destroys it.
That's the way
that. It seems like you're doing just fine. But I would also say that technically, maybe you're just the second generation.
Well, that's the question that we've been kicking around: who's first and who's second? Since my grandparents were never really involved, they got it rolling, but we're not really involved in the wash.
Yeah. So if it's the second generation, that probably puts a little less pressure on you because you're actually building it right now. Right, you're doing it.
And as far as the way we function, we do kind of feel like that's where we are. That in a lot of ways, I am running it kind of as the second generation, hoping to take it to the next level.
Now, it's my understanding that it wasn't necessarily a given that you were going to work in the car wash industry. You went off to college and then, I guess like most people do, did some soul searching.
That's true. I grew up in, I was, as a little kid, I played at the car wash at night when my parents were working. I started working here part time when I was about 12. I was washing towels at the full service, and 50 cents an hour my dad paid me. And I joked that some days that was probably more than I was worth, but that was where I started out at. And I went to college and worked part time through college, and my degree's not in a related field at all. I don't have a business or management degree. I didn't expect to come back to car washing at that time. But when I graduated, I looked around and talked to my dad and said, I'd like to come back and work for a year if there's room for me in the company, and decide where to go from there. And that would have been about 19 years ago now, and I've been here ever since, and really enjoyed it for the most part, and I'm glad I stayed. It was a good decision.
So if you didn't stay, what was your degree?
My
in,
degree,
and what do you think you'd be doing?
So my degree was actually in Christian ministry, youth ministry, was the emphasis.
Okay.
So my plan was to be a youth pastor in a church, and had a couple opportunities out of college, and didn't feel led into any of those, and so came back to car washing, and it's worked out ideally. I still do that volunteer at my church, but it's not my career. So
very good. So what you mentioned, you have you have one tunnel location, you have some self-serve, some in-bay automatics. What's the landscape look like in for you regards to where they're located, how far apart they are? Just if you can expand on that.
So like I said, our tunnel and one self-serve is on a location together. They're side by side. And then our other two self-serves within bays are about 10 miles north. And they're actually located within a half a mile of each other. One of them we had torn down and built from the ground up, and then the other one was built a few years later by a competitor, and we purchased it last year. So we have those two very close to each other, in a town about 10 miles north of where our tunnel's located.
Do you have much competition where you're located?
I wouldn't say a lot, but I would say for the number of people, it's probably more than necessary. Because we're rural, because people are fairly spread out, the population is low. There's not a lot of people in the area. We do have a tunnel that is just down the road from our existing tunnel, which is not uncommon these days, but in a town of our county has about 25,000 people in the whole county. So there's not a lot of people. Most people would probably not look at the demographics and say, yeah, we should put a tunnel there. These days, it just doesn't make sense.
Sure. So for our audience who doesn't know, you're located central Pennsylvania, about an hour to the east of State College, which
Penn
is
State.
Where Penn State, and about an hour-ish, hour and a half to the west of Wilkes-Barre. And for Lauren, our producer of this podcast, I need to point out that it is Wilkes-Barre and Scranton go hand in hand, and Scranton is the home of Dunder Mifflin from The Office. So,
yeah. If you're not Philly or Pittsburgh, that's the other main Pennsylvania claim to fame is Scranton and The Office.
Sure. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And really, probably where you're located is about halfway between from Pittsburgh and from the capital region in New York. So I'm certainly not unfamiliar with the area. Certainly beautiful country up there. I'm assuming it's like big hunting type community.
Yeah, lots of hunters. Actually, we joke a lot. The first 2 days of deer season are a holiday. The kids don't have school for the most part, so yeah, hunting's big.
It's funny because I live now in suburbia, and that is probably foreign to people in my neighborhood. But you're right. We had the first day of hunting season was a holiday.
Yeah.
So. But I guess I digress. Back to Clean Mist and kind of your company size. Like, how many employees do you have?
Yeah, so we've actually shrunk a little bit. We have converted our tunnel. We'll get to this in a little bit. We've converted to an exterior tunnel. So our whole company right now is only about 12 to 14 of us total. And that's about half of where we were 2 years ago, and in part because we not that we laid people off. We just, as we were losing people, we couldn't replace them, and that became a challenge.
Sure. And I think no matter what size of a company you are, that is an issue that everyone is facing right now is the employment, is finding employees, keep retaining them, but when they do leave, replacing them. So going from that full service model to an exterior model makes complete sense. What was that transition like for you as a company, but also for your customer
Yeah.
base?
So it was challenging in some ways. It was a long time coming. We were traditional full service until 2008, in that we vacuumed online at the entrance to the wash. Everyone was out of their car. We towel dried, did windows, and in 2000, actually, I'm sorry, 2007, we converted. We installed pay stations, and the customer stayed in the car. And if they added interior cleaning, it was done after the wash. So we did that in 2007, and over the last 10 years, our interior percentage has fallen, and in part because we're washing a lot more cars, but in part because the demand for the interior has slipped. So and we wanted it to. We couldn't do vacuuming and windows on every car like we did
Sure.
25 years ago. It just wasn't working. And then, over the last 2 years, as our volume again continued to grow, and our team members were getting tougher and tougher to find, we started looking at, at what point do we maybe just eliminate interior cleaning or downsize even more, go more just an express interior detail instead of a routine, and do less yet. And then finally, COVID hit last year, and it kind of rushed all that through. Overnight, we weren't doing interiors because it seemed like we shouldn't be in people's cars. And after a month, we started saying, this might just be time. Take the Band-Aid off. Let's just rip it off and go on. So that's what we did. We still have customers calling us, especially right now in the spring. Lots of people are saying, "Oh, my spring cleaning, my annual car wash, I got to get the inside done." And sorry, we don't do it anymore. And the farther we removed from when we did it, we're realizing, okay, if you haven't done your interior in a year, that was a challenging interior that we weren't excited about
Yeah.
anyway. Um,
Yeah.
but regular customers, I've got lots of customers that I know well. We've been doing their interior for them for 20 years or more. It's tough to look at them and say, I'm sorry that service isn't coming back. But it has been a win for us. Much easier to manage. The customers that aren't getting the interior done, I think, are happier. They're in and out more quickly. Um,
Hmm.
we don't have the pressure of those interiors. It has become far easier to manage, and our volume actually has continued to grow. Obviously, some of that's weather. We've had a great winter here in the Northeast, um, but yeah, I think we're in a good place now.
Do you have an unlimited
We
program?
do, we do. Yep, we started in
And do,
2010 with an unlimited program.
Gotcha. I think COVID it was a bit of a blessing in disguise in some senses, because I think it accelerated some of what you were talking
Yes.
about. These long-term goals, people had some reprieve and able to step back and look at um, where the where their companies were
Hmm.
going. It also it opened the door to make those drastic changes almost overnight. And what I mean by that, you know, I work in marketing, and if we're going to take a price increase or make some sort of um,
Hmm.
change that's going to be very visible, you always want to aim for kind of like a milestone in the year. 4th of July, kids going back to school, January
Right.
1st. There's a change that happens in people's minds that it's easier for them to accept.
Mhm.
I don't know the full psychology behind it, but people were able to do that, or car wash operators were able to do that with COVID, because you reopen, you said, all right, we're not doing interior clean. This was, it kind of acted like that milestone. We had something very similar happen here at our full service locations. We raised the price of the interior clean. We kind of restructured kind of the way it looked too. It was like an add-on package to an exterior. You don't just go in and say, give me the full serve. Now you're purchasing the exterior, you're getting the interior clean. So we were able to do that, and we towel dried our exterior cars at our full serve locations, and we eliminated that when we came kind of back out of COVID. And again, it was one of those. It was easier to do rather than having to do it, in March, not during a pandemic, I guess. So
Yeah, that's been our experience
did
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys have any other, I guess, policy changes, operation changes because of COVID? Not necessarily policy changes, but more process-driven changes because of COVID?
That was by far the most significant one. It's I think it clarified things for us. We were able to see where we wanted to be and work at getting there a little bit faster. But yeah, the interior cleaning has been a challenge for us for a long time. Doing it well, doing it consistently. Certainly the challenge of, I think cars are getting dirtier inside. People spend more time in them, and that made that full service more difficult. And then being in an area where we're not doing incredibly high volumes, so it was harder to staff for the interior cleaning as well. So yeah, that was the major one for us. COVID made that a clear decision, and we were able to pull it off and make that change last year.
Did you do anything? Did you add free vacs or?
So we are kind of in the process, because we have the self-serve on site. We already have a bunch of self-serve vacs that are paid vacs. So what we've done with our point of sale provider, we're able to dispense a token to the customers coming through the tunnel. So that's been our interim solution. If they come through the wash, they can get a vacuum token that gives them 10 minutes of time at our self-serve vacuums. We are looking in the future here. We'll have to add some vacs and how we want to do that to make it maybe a little cleaner than the token option. But the token option has been working fairly well. It gives free vacs, and if they need more time, they can upgrade. And then our self-serve vacs also include shampoo, fragrance options like that, so they have a little bit more than just the vacuum. Someone can use those functions as well.
Gotcha. So going back to the unlimited program, started in 2010, how much emphasis do you put on it? I mean, is that what your creators are talking about, or do you have, some people are more focused on wash cards or books or whatever it is?
So
what's your philosophy?
It has become our main focus as far as marketing goes. We still offer gift cards and wash books, but what has happened is the books tend to be for someone that's looking for a Christmas gift. That's we sell packs of 3, so it's a little lower dollar amount, not a commitment to it. If you're doing it for a gift, the unlimited is a little harder to gift. We do offer a 3-month or 6-month prepaid membership, but the recurring people don't typically enjoy. So that ends up being our wash books fill that gap a little bit. But other than that, we're really focused on the unlimited. We do not man our pay stations currently, not consistently. Occasionally we do, but we do have our pay stations though, asking each customer if they'd like to sign up. We keep playing with our screens, trying to find ways to make sure that people are aware of the membership. We want to make sure no one comes through and goes, "Oh, I didn't even know you offered that." That was an issue early on. For years, people would say, "Oh, I didn't even know you had that." So making sure our signage and our pay stations are very clear about that, and that's been good. So focus, yes, it is a big focus, but not to the point where we're asking every single customer with an attendant, is that something that you would like to purchase?
Yeah, we had something very similar. We built a location in 2017. It was our first fully kiosk or teller location. And now, because of labor issues and minimum wage and all that, that's the model we've gone to. Our new properties have tellers. We're retrofitting old existing properties with tellers. And what we found is they do a much better job at selling the unlimited program than the actual human being. And we think it's just because they ask the question every time, which is interesting. And we joke, the teller doesn't talk back to you. It's never late and all that good
Doesn't
stuff.
get in a bad mood.
Yeah. The tellers are interesting because it's certainly your customers need to get used to it, and I think it's for people who have them. You can't just set it and forget it. It sounds like you're doing the right things in the sense of, you're keeping it in your mind of, working on different screens, different flows, to make sure that you're selling properly or you're maximizing that asset as much as possible. So it sounds like certainly Kleen Mist has gone through some big changes. A lot of that maybe labor driven, but I'm curious from you for a staff of 14 and second/third generation, what's a typical day look like for you?
Typical day, there's a lot of typical days, because I end up with, my fingers are in the IT stuff. When we talk about changing XPT screens, I do most of that myself, designing and setting up the workflows and the transitions to make those do what we want them to. And a fair amount of the mechanical maintenance is still done by either myself or my dad. We've been talking about the fact that with the self-serves we have and wanting to grow, we need a maintenance team, one person first and then a small team probably, because we aren't able to keep up and do things as well as we need to. But so some days it's coming in and just, okay, what broke or what's not doing what we should be doing right now? What do we need to tweak? So my day can fluctuate a lot that way. But I've been spending a lot of time, really the last year and a half, we've really spent a lot of investment in leadership and learning it myself and then working with my team, so that my hands aren't in everything anymore. We've been able to put people in place that take care of a lot of those odds and ends. So typical day, I guess I don't have a great answer for what you're looking for there. But yeah, that's I don't know if I have a typical day. They're all over the place.
I would assume that it has to be so hard to, there's management where you are, say, the boss of your department or whatever, and you have the people that work for you. It's hard enough to give up things there. I can only imagine being an owner of a company and essentially your name is behind it and having to deal with, finding that trust in other people who have the same expectations, same standards that you have. How have you dealt with that? You say you've invested a lot of time in leadership. Yeah. Walk us through that process.
Yeah. So what I've, it's been a challenge. I kind of watched my dad go through it for a lot of years, and in part realizing we can't keep doing everything ourselves. So looking for people either on our team or outside our team that we felt had the right attitude and character, and then bringing them onto the team or working with them on our team to teach them. Basically, it becomes you're working side by side with them and explaining how you think. Instead of just doing it, say, okay, this is what I think should happen here, and here's why. And once they start to see how your thought process works, then they can make those decisions on their own. Because it's not possible to write down every possible scenario and say, okay, memorize these scenarios, and this is how you respond. But we've actually developed core values, what drives us as a company, and then based on those core values, that's how we make decisions. So when we've got a customer in front of us that might be upset about something, We're working from that perspective, what we want to do for that customer. So hopefully most of our team can get to the same spot by using those foundational principles. So we've worked really hard to implement that and to spend some time getting other people on board with us to think the same way, and then they can lead hopefully the other team members along the same path. We have to get to a place where it doesn't all come just from the top.
Right. So, how long have you been working on that? I guess.
Probably aggressively the last 2 years. I've actually joined a group of other business people that we get together now twice a month, just by Zoom, and bounce ideas off of each other, talk about the frustrations and the challenges. I've been reading a lot of books, talking to other car wash operators as well. What have they done? Kind of all started from the principle of, we can't really expand until we're doing what we're doing here really well. It has to be, we have to be able to replicate it. And if it's all dependent on one person, you can't replicate that. Really focused on that about the last 2 years.
So is the plan to expand?
It is. Exactly what that looks like. So, we're still figuring out, but we do want to expand. We do want to grow. The challenge is, because of where we're at, I can't build a tunnel, 5 miles down the road because there's not enough people there. So, what's expansion going to look like? Is it tunnels a little bit more distant? Is it in-bay automatics spread around? But yeah, we would like to expand. We would like to continue to grow. I'd like to, I enjoy the aspect of a team and taking care of a team and being able to teach and lead people, give them opportunities, and expansion allows us to do that for more people.
Gotcha. I do want to shift. Kind of touched on the mechanical side of things, the equipment side of things. I know Kleen Mist does use the innovative Dispenser It, both in your tunnel but also in your self-serve. From our standpoint, the tunnel Dispenser It is kind of like the bright shiny star. And the self-serve Dispenser It, which is very similar, just doesn't get as much, airtime as the regular. But what has that product done for you guys? I guess in both formats.
Yeah. So we did the tunnel Dispenser It first because we had a need there, and it really just kind of has simplified the chemistry part. A lot more.
What were you using before? Did you have?
Yeah, before it was.
Were you
hydrominders and flow jets mostly? That was the majority of our chemistry equipment prior to the Dispenser It, and not bad, but you've got 15 flow jets and 15 hydrominders, and diaphragms stick and fail and need replaced. So there's always little things, and you're watching all of that. We have found the injector system to be more reliable in general. We were familiar with it from the in-bay side. Laser 4000 years ago had a similar idea. So the Dispenser It system and then using the VFD-driven pump was significant to us. And so it was almost a no-brainer once it was all put together and we saw what you guys were doing to innovate it. That's what we wanted in our back room. So it was a quick and easy install. Did it myself pretty much in a day. Yanked everything off the walls, swapped over, dialed in the injector sizes is probably the biggest questionable part, and just consistency of our chemistry application has been huge. So yeah, that has worked out really well. The self-serve side, that's been kind of in the back of my mind for a lot of years, wanting to get that technology in a self-serve bay to where we could give a much better show to the customer than what you get through the high pressure gun using a flow jet, which is pretty common in the self-serve. And I started tinkering around with building one myself, and just got more complicated. I didn't have the time to make that happen. So I ended up with a lot of fittings on the bench, but it didn't get much farther than that. trying to figure out how to do the antifreeze aspects and all that. So when I started talking to Shane at Innovate, and he was talking about what you guys were doing, I saw it at some of the Huffman self-serves, and I'm like, okay, that's where I want to get. So we actually did a rehab at our busiest self-serve, pulled out all of the low pressure functions, added a bunch more that we didn't have. So in our self-serve bays with Innovate It, we now have tire cleaner, low pressure wax, triple foam polish, bug remover, pre-soak and foam brush, um, in addition to some extra high pressure functions and air dryers. Um, but the show in the bay through doing a foam gun is incredible. And so we have customers, they're waiting in line to use the bay and seeing someone covering their car with this foam going, what is that? I need to try that out. So then they start asking, well, what do the functions do? And we are seeing very, you know, um, consistent growth in the low pressure function usage. Um, someone's covering their car with 3 colors of bright foam. Someone sitting behind them is going, "What is that?" I want to try that. I want to see what that does. And then, of course, if it gives them a nice shine on their car, in addition to the show, then they do it again. And our pre-soak gets used very heavily. Foam brush has always been fairly popular, and now the low pressure wax, the triple foam, are all getting significant use. So, and
So,
without trouble,
oh, go ahead.
without having a lot of issues, it's worked really well consistently.
Is all of your locations outfitted with the dispenser?
Not yet. No, we've done one. We were just talking about the second one's probably coming up, and the third location is the one we just bought last year. We want to do that eventually, but we're still trying to grow that one. It was a neglected location. We're trying to get the numbers up a little bit before we spend too much money there.
Gotcha. So we kind of touched on the history, where you guys are today. I'm curious what you see in the future. What does 2021 look like for Kleen Mist?
2021, we've begun the transition, to where I'm no longer just the manager, but actually owner, third generation or second, depending on how we define that. And so my parents are moving towards retirement slowly. They don't want to go too fast, but they are heading in that direction. So that's step one. Step two, I think, is we are starting to identify where are the places we can grow, what are the things we can add on, and we are, the Unlimiteds have continued to drive our tunnel business. Looking at how can we take some of the concepts there and move them to the in-bay world. That's something that I think is coming. Obviously, there's limitations to the in-bays in capacity, but I think there's a drive where people want something, and we like the recurring revenue idea. So how can we cross that bridge? I think that's going to be a big piece that is coming up for us in the next year.
Are we going to see you at any of the trade shows?
Yes, we'll definitely be at the international one in Vegas this year, and the Northeast one we always go to. My dad's actually kicking around going to the Southwest one as well. That's not our territory, but it's been so long since we were able to get to a trade show right now. We miss seeing what's going on, miss seeing some people, and so we might end up being represented at 3 of them this year.
Yeah. It's amazing that how much the industry, or just people within the industry, love the trade shows. It's incredible. Like, everyone loves them. And I think that says a lot. I think it says a lot about the type of people who are involved in the industry. Mm-hmm. And not only is it fun, but it's people who are passionate about what they do.
Yeah, people love the industry and love to talk shop with other people in the industry.
Yeah,
and that's been one of the things that I've loved for years. There's guys I see just at the trade shows, but every year you run into them. And they're happy to talk for 10 minutes or an hour about what they're doing and ask you questions about what you're doing. And I've talked to Shane and Tom at shows consistently over the years, and that's always fun. It's always fun to see what's new and what people are working on. And I miss it. The last year and a half not having a trade show has been tough.
So I will. I'll end with one final question. Just more of a I don't know what the right word I'm looking for is. Not thought leading, but just kind of where do you see car wash industry heading? And I know it might be different in your eyes, being in a smaller environment, but just in general, where do you think the next 5-10 years, where the industry will be?
In some ways, it's hard to say. I think in the last 10 years, it has changed more than at any point in the last 40 that we've seen. But we've also, started to notice there's cycles in the industry. We've been riding, I think, a wave in the last 10 years that's very good. Busy, we've been bringing new customers to the industry. The washes being built are bringing more and more people into the industry. Unfortunately, I'm nervous that cycle's not going to last forever. My dad will tell you in 40 years, there's been this cycle, not quite as high as this time, but then there's a downturn, and there's some contraction of the industry, and then it comes back stronger. We've seen it shift from tunnels to in bays and back to tunnels. I think there's probably going to be a shift, not completely to in bays, but I think in bays are probably primed for a little bit of growth as people start to realize there's not enough room to build tunnels everywhere. Certainly in our market, the in bays have a foothold because we're not crowded enough to have tunnels, but people still want to wash their car, and in bays fill that really well. And I think there's lots of places like that across the country. It might not be as exciting as a tunnel that's washing 200,000 cars a year, but there's lots of communities that in bays can go in and maybe even as a part of a tunnel chain, but there's an in bay option there. I think there's potential for that to happen over the next couple of years. I don't know where all the money coming into the industry is going to take us.
I was going to say,
and it's also I think there's less of us single family operators left, or single location operators. I used to know a lot of people, and now it's a lot of chains, and there's a couple that are around. There's definitely fewer of those, and hopefully there's a place for us a little bit longer, but a lot have sold out over the last 5 years.
Sure. I was going to say that the in-bay, what's interesting about your take is, and it sounds like you're heading in this direction, is that you want to figure out the unlimited model for the in-bay automatics. And that could very well be what it takes to kind of go back to that wave where the in-bays come back. Mm-hmm. I know people have ideas of how to make it work, and it'll be interesting to see. And maybe you guys will be the first ones to do it, and you'll lead the charge.
I don't think we'll be first, but I think what I hear in the in-bay market is a lot of what we heard in the tunnel 12 years ago. You can't do unlimited because you can't afford to. It's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And it has been proven that there's ways to make it work in the tunnel. It's been, I don't think anyone argues anymore that it's not successful. And so now you talk to in-bay operators and you hear some of those same reservations. Just have to get the right pieces together, pull the right levers to figure out how to make it work in that market. So, yeah, we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I appreciate it so much that you took the time and came on today and joined us. And it was great to hear about not only yourself, but your family, where you guys are heading. And I look forward, and hopefully we can have you on again down the road sometime.
I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. And I've enjoyed your podcast so far. Looking forward to hearing some new ones.
All right, that's it. That's a wrap on this episode of the Modern Car Wash Podcast. A big thanks to Dave for taking the time to speak with us today. If you like what you heard, be sure to follow along wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out on YouTube via innovativecarwash.com. Until next time, stay safe and stay tuned.